A few introductions before. Pronouns are she, her. VOI preference, I prefer that you do it through voice because I cannot see the chat. And please don't badger me. Okay, starting my speech. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we argue that it is not welfare and it is not human rights if a world where people are going to exclude a minority just for the greater good of the whole. So now let's first delve into the key terms of this motion. Again, a world where individuals are not strongly predisposed, meaning that people do not naturally or overwhelmingly lean towards a specific way of thinking. And in this debate, that specific way of thinking is utilitarianism. Now, utilitarianism can be defined as a moral philosophy that is judged based on maximizing overall happiness or the well-being. And often, in philosophy, it is most often quoted as the greatest good for the greatest number, meaning that you have to maximize the benefits for those that you could maximize for the greater good, excluding those who do not really benefit or those that are not really do not have a greater number within the involvement itself. So now let's paint a world where people are predisposed towards utilitarianism and what does it really look like. First, this world may look like that people are prioritizing sorry okay people are prioritizing the greater good of people, meaning that these people are naturally prioritizing utility over emotions and restrictive values that would become highly transactional. This means that the government will are urging individuals to get on careers that maximize them for the greater good rather than self-fulfilling. An individual's way of thinking is that they should benefit a number of people, not just themselves, and a number of people for the greater good or for the greater happiness, even if it costs something important within their lives. Second, this also means that in this world, individual rights and justice is individual rights and justice is not really that on top of the services that is being created. Because firstly, there will be hyper efficiency in resource allocation. This means that governments, business, and even personal actions are now optimized for maximizing overall well-being. This means that healthcare, education, and employment are now distributed in ways that produce the most benefit rather than based on individual rights or needs. And third, there will now be weaker emphasis on individual rights and emotions. Why? Two analysis for this is that one, because laws and now social norms are now designed for maximum benefit, now will disregard personal freedom if they conflict with the greater good or with the greater good for the people or with the maximum benefit. Second analysis for this, concepts like privacy, personal autonomy, and minority protection are
POI.
now compromised. I will not take that POI when they do not align with overall utility. Now, as we discuss what this world looks like, let's now discuss the arguments on why we do not prefer a world where people are not predisposed to authoritarianism. One is because this will lead to moral atrocity who may want to self-fulfill themselves or who may benefit but actually fulfills themselves. This means that people will now have a moral confusion on what to really follow within their certain career or certain lives within this predisposition. This also means that, for example, um, uh, this also means that in a world where people are not predisposed to authoritarianism, it ensures them ethical safeguards. Why? Because it prevents them from justifications of harmful harms that are for maximum benefits. Second, individual rights and justice will now not be subordinate to pure utility. One, because many ethical frameworks argue that
POI.
justice and rights are not intrinsic, like for example in philosophy, and not just instruments for maximizing happiness. Because now, without prioritizing these rights, policies will now be able to justify different traditions and cultures for the maximum benefit or for the maximization of a whole and the greater good. And third, human relationships and emotional integrity will not be undermined in a utilitarian world. Why is this? Because personal relationships, love, and loyalty are often irrational but are deeply meaningful into our way of living and to the well-being of a human. If people are strongly predisposed into utilitarianism, they might prioritize utility over response. For example, they choose to abandon a struggling loved one if it benefits them or benefits the people more. Like the question that, will you save your loved one or will you save the 30 people that are drowning within the boat? Who will you choose? Because now families and friendships will now be transactional rather than built on intrinsic emotional value that will now lead to a weakened social fabric and will now also lead to a widespread emotional detachment of people to humanity itself. Now, a few impacts on this. Number one is that in a world where people are not strongly predisposed to utilitarianism, it prevents moral justifications for harmful actions. In this world, for example, people are people get to remain moral safeguards that prevent these atrocities, ensuring that there is ethical considerations beyond utility calculations. Impact number two, this will now strengthen individuals' rights and justice system because again we have
POI.
to consider utilitarianism often leads to laws that favor the majority while disregarding minority rights, which can justify systemic discrimination or unjust legal system. In a world where people are not predisposed to utilitarianism mindset, it fosters a right-based justice system where there is due process and there is dignity upheld regardless of the calculation for the maximum benefit. Impact number three, it will now promote social stability and a more genuine human connection. Because in this world, we're not literally removing utilitarianism, but rather we're lessening it. Why? Because now people now will constantly prioritize their emotions over utility, and relationships will now not be transactional, but rather based on their values and customs. Now, what is the trade-off here? Sure, the maximum benefit benefits a lot of people, but think about it. If we leave a minority, for example, in healthcare, a utilitarian mindset or a utilitarian world will now prioritize younger people because younger people are for more utility and elder people are now set aside. Now, this will create a very big discrimination and a violation on an individual rights and human rights that must be cared for by everyone. With all of those reasons, side with OG. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Prime Minister. Now calling on Leader of Opposition. You're here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Hi. I'm Andre. Pronouns he, him. POIs through chat. Just say POI and I'll try to tackle it by at the time.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry. Can you go closer to your mic? It
is
seems
this
a bit
better po?
muffled. Yes, yes, much better. Thank you.
Eh, sorry. Um, Before I start my speech, I just first of all like to thank the SAI contingent. Kuya Stephen told me to do this. Thank you for everyone there. Thank you for Kuya Franco, Kasilag, Elisa Naang, Bogapura, when the world needed them the most, they were there. Okay. Thank you, Kuya Franco. I'm just gonna take a few seconds to fix my notes and my timer. Sorry. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In the trolley problem, you are forced to decide whether you flip the lever to kill one person or not touch it to kill 6 people. Panel, in our side, we strongly believe that killing one person provides a happier result than killing six. So before I go touch on my arguments, a few pieces of framing them. What does our world/policy look like? Our world is a world where people are inherently utilitarian. How does this manifest? People work towards the happiness of the community as a whole rather than working towards individual happiness because they believe that this is like the most morally correct option because of the impacts that it gives, not just to them, but to everyone else. Next, a utilitarian person, how would this manifest it? Is, for example, a utilitarian person would save a young doctor who has the potential to save countless lives from a car crash rather than saving the old lady next to the doctor. Because, one, the utilitarian sees the potential in something and works towards utilizing this potential to advance society as a whole. at the expense of this moral. We'll concede this trade-off, but we'll explain more on how it's still beneficial on our side. Now, on government's world, they have a society where people are inherently selfish, people who will do anything to improve their own life at the expense of others. So unless government explicitly explains why pushing away others would lead to an overall better society, then I believe we've already win as opposition against both government teams. The delta then is in which side results in more development in the community, which side results in less selfishness and disorder due to personal motives. We believe that this development is a prerequisite to the happiness that OG has been talking about, and we believe we win on this metric when I tackle this later. Next then, on second piece of framing, what this debate is actually about. It's not about debating if utilitarianism is perfect, because all philosophical ideals have trade-off. However, it is a matter of if utilitarianism would result to more progress in a society. And later, I will talk about how this would bring about more progress. So, what do both sides have to prove to win? Us, upside, we have to prove that the individuals on our side achieve a happier quality of life, while government bench has to prove that the means don't justify the ends, and they have to prioritize personal gain over everyone else. If neither OG or CG prove this, then we already win over both teams. Moving on to my first argument. The utilitarian predisposition leads to decisions that favor the consequences. First of all, why is this important? Moral frameworks exist to help us make good decisions, so we should favor the system that leads to the most positive impact. Two reasons on why this is true. One, utilitarianism provides well-being than arbitrary moral constraints. On Gov side, prioritize no. On our side, we prioritize consistency over consequences, meaning that they may protect abstract rights at the cost of real suffering. For example, they might oppose redistributive taxation because it violates property rights, even if it reduces poverty in lives. Next, it prevents moral contradictions and inconsistencies because utilitarianism ensures fairness in outcomes and it provides a clear pragmatic method to resolve dilemmas. What are the impacts of this then? Two things. Utilitarianism offers clear pragmatic solutions to complex problems instead of relying on arbitrary rules. Everyone is like-minded insofar as everyone is working towards what is best for everyone. Second, utilitarianism results in less people in power being corrupt because now they see this power as a means to benefit the rest of society and not just themselves. Once these leaders are less corrupt, it means that more funds could be allocated in developing society as a whole. More funds could be spent on things like welfare, on things like helping the general populace that would overall lead to a happier life for the general populace now that these political leaders are not using the funds or not embezzling the funds for their own gain. One piece of way then. More dilemmas are constant, which means a reliable framework is essential. Next, which means that history shows utilitarian policies, for example, vaccines, public health interventions, save billions of lives. Moving on to my next argument then. A utilitarian predisposition leads to more effective social and political structures. Why is this important? Society functions better when people think in terms of overall welfare rather than rigid rules or emotional impulses. Why is this true? Two things. Utilitarian reasoning leads to rational outcome-driven policies rather than emotional or ideological ones. For example, the COVID lockdowns, which helped us overall because we're not going out infecting everyone else. Now, the comparative on their side is in their world, people would resist such measures because they infringe on individual rights. Virtue ethicists might distribute resource on deservedness, like people who deserve it, rather than who benefits most. Next piece of reasoning. It ensures maximum happiness rather than protect outdated norms. So what are the impacts of this? One, leaders and citizens prioritize policies that actually improves lives, leading to more development into society, which then is also a prerequisite to the happiness that we as individuals experience. Next, another impact is that there are fewer harmful laws based on outdated moral intuitions, and more because now people are more inclusive towards the general public. Next, there's more efficient resource allocation. Now, OG treated this as a harm, but we will flip this and say this only further benefits our case because once again, it only just leads to more development overall. So I'm going then. The most disadvantaged benefits the most. In terms of likelihood, historically, utilitarian policies, for example, social welfare, progressive taxation, and universal healthcare improve the quality of life because it treats the general because it balances or it provides equity to everyone in the society, leading to everyone thinking or everyone working towards the same goal of progressing their society, leading to more happiness now that everyone's working towards this goal, and more happiness because of the amenities that they can provide now that society is developing more because of them. Proud to.
Thank you for that, Leader of Opposition. Now calling on Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Okay, so introductions first. My name is Migz Rafael Valimento. I am from Migz Rafael Valimento. Pronouns, if you were to refer to me, he, him, or like anything else if you're comfortable. And then POIs, please just like open your camera. Please just chat it in the chat box since I can hear the notification. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Opposition poses to us the trolley problem. Opposition chooses to save 6 people instead of 1. But what they don't say to you is that those 6 people were politicians who were corrupt and politicians who displaces the millions of people, and that one person they sacrificed was a saint. The first thing I'm going to do then is possible call-outs and to protect my first speaker argument. They say to us that the metric in this debate on which side develops the community more. Problem, they never tell us why is this beneficial or catering to the people inside of that community themselves. Secondly, it provides contradiction. They say to us that like it prevents contradictions and moral dilemmas if you are much more utilitarian. However, we say this to you, that this is because you allow the dictatorship of one pragmatic mentality to be rich and to be successful that displaces people who are marginalized and displaces people who cannot have the capacity to be successful. They say to us that corruption is less on their side because politicians have an incentive to be utilitarian to themselves. We say to you that this is self-defeating. And let's flip that argument, right? We say to you that people have an incentive to cater to themselves more precisely because they are much more proximate or they have more incentive to cater to their family, to cater to their parents, precisely because it is much more proximate to them, and precisely because it is much more proximate, they pressure themselves more, or those communities pressure themselves more to help themselves, and this like matters, this like delves into the argumentation of selfishness. The first principle I'm going to prove to you as an extension is that the extreme utilitarianism infringes on human satisfaction and enjoyment. In status quo, things you do, your passion, your hobbies, and your enjoyment will be net negative because society doesn't view them as positive or contributes to the community. After all, you don't fulfill your responsibility to like help your community, and you don't fulfill your responsibility to upbring your parents from poverty, even if you don't care about others' opinion. We say to you that you yourself don't think of your victories, your individual victories, as a net positive because you constantly think that you waste your time and resources. It manifests on how you constantly think. But why are you debating in the first place when you could be helping your parents with their jobs? You could be helping your parents like mag-urong. It manifests on your parents forcing you to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, and to be an engineer even if you don't want it, precisely because it gains the most financial capacity and like profit. You have the innate burden to help your most proximate community, and we say that because it sacrifices this sort of happiness or individual fulfillment, we say to you that's bad. And here's the kicker: it is in this world where in the majority of times your passion is a physical barrier for your success because it doesn't directly affect about how you could bring your parents up for poverty or such. Therefore, we say to you that in the comparative, objective success is the metric on how you should judge your Therefore, we stated that in the comparative coming from opposition, objective success is the metric on how you should judge your life. Because even if you had a good life, even if you enjoyed it with your family, if you don't bring them up from poverty, or if you don't bring success, if you don't bring pragmatics to them, or to have long-lasting impact of them, you already is someone who's considered a failure. You're already someone who's considered a scum. The second principle then, that extreme utilitarianism infringes on the human dignity. That utilitarianism is innately divisive towards marginalized groups and the people who cannot contribute to net outcome or happiness because inherently lower their values as members of society. This manifests on how the government doesn't help people in impoverished areas precisely because they can't return their profits, or they can't return, or those people doesn't have the capacity to help them back. Therefore, governments and large actors don't give into charity or other factors because it doesn't bring maximum profit maximization. And we say to you that we as a community allow this precisely because we also have the innate like nature to think of utilitarianism. Therefore, we don't force them precisely because we understand that we need to help others, that we need to help ourselves first. Therefore, you create tangible metric trade-offs between moral decisions, and we say to you that that is bad. It manifests on how you don't donate or give alms to the poor because you lose money. Thus, you enable the cycle of perpetual barriers, right, towards the people, even though they want to contribute, doesn't have the support to contribute to the community. In general, you allow the principal value of life on others to be ignored because it doesn't align with your interest or the state interest itself, and you villainize people precisely because you want to compensate yourself that I am doing good, and even if you don't give to the poor, you're going to consider it as net positive precisely because you saved money. Principle number 3 then is that extreme utilitarianism encourages human selfishness. You make concessions within yourself. You make concessions within the government that even if they hurt other people, even if you hurt other people, you allow yourself to feel good, to make good, and therefore don't consider that you may have done something wrong. It manifests on how your community and your family looks at you when you become a saint, right? When you help other people, when you sacrifice without no returns, and when you protect others even if you do get hurt. Your family is going to look at you and say to you, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to be protecting your own family. You're not supposed to be sacrificing your life for some people. You create relationships out of agendas because they are being rich. You create relationships out of agenda of them being rich, having connections. And even if we say to you that's beneficial, you get hurt, you don't fit in, and you are discriminated against, and we say that that's principally abhorrent precisely because that could have been avoided if everyone wasn't utilitarian in the first place. And here's the comparative. You encourage concessions
POI.
as a community. Yes, go.
Okay, so if people are not naturally utilitarian, what specific moral instinct are people following in your world?
We say to you that this motion is not black and white. The motion states that it's strongly predisposed. This means that people still have an innate condition to be utilitarian. However, extreme utilitarianism is not to be factored in precisely because we say to you that in our comparative, charity and individual fulfillment is much more better. And that is going to fulfill this sort of like space left behind by this extreme utilitarianism, right? And here's the comparative. You encourage concessions as a community, as a government, and as an individual, that pragmatic benefits are not all there is to life. You force your government to make sacrifices. You force your community to make sacrifices. Your community forces the government to make sacrifices to help impoverished areas, to create policies towards the marginalized, even if it creates some sort of moral dilemma, even if it makes contradictions, precisely because we say to you that the consequences doesn't like justify the means or doesn't justify like this sort of thing. Even if there is sacrifice, we say to you that in their counterfactual, it's much more beneficial. You foster yourself to love yourself more, that even if there's an obligation for you to create benefits for tangible benefits for yourself, your family, and for your community, you make concessions that you don't have to hurt yourself to be fulfilled in life. You make concessions that what matters most is on how you fulfill your life. And we say to you that some of their benefits are actually not exclusive, precisely because utilitarianism like happens also in our world. However, it doesn't like negate the fact that there needs to be some sort of like personal connections between people, and the fact that you sacrifice some people. You create concessions that there is no objective fulfillment on how you should metric life, and that you should find your own life rather than to walk to like a hedonic treadmill that your parents placed you, that you need to be rich. And precisely because for all of these reasons, we're very, very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Prime Minister. Now calling on Deputy Leader of the Opposition. You're here.
I'd just like to give a few shout outs. Thank you to Invictus, to Kay Franco, Yakov, Ellison, my teammate Andre for being there for all the 4 rounds. Yeah, thank you from parents for paying all my debate fees for all the compets I've went to. That's basically it. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. The problem with with government's case, it's extremely it just prioritizes the individual. Let's talk about why it actually doesn't infringe on your rights and a few pieces of responses before I go on into any of my main arguments. Number 1, OG claims that utilitarianism sacrifices individual rights. False. It's actually not true because utilitarianism protects the rights better by ensuring they actually serve society. E.g., things like free speech versus hate speech. They're able to get the rights that actually are gonna benefit society instead of some arbitrary social construct that is just set from a long time ago. Because so basically you're able to get my time. You're basically able to get the proper help because we don't actually sacrifice the rights, because you're able to benefit the masses, you're able to benefit the amount of people, and you're making the world a better place. Number two, they said that it makes relationships transactional because real life. No, it's actually not true because real life relationships already involve trade-offs, and utilitarianism actually strengthens your cooperation through the fact that you're cooperating with other people to maximize the world's and the masses no happiness. You're basically trying to maximize your happiness by making sure you're trying, but you're not inherently sacrificing yourself just to serve the entire community, right? Utilitarianism is not based on like you're not trying to be a Jesus figure in life, right? The basis of utilitarianism is basically benefiting the moral masses, the masses. So basically, how do we able to get this? Because OG claims that it's hard to calculate utility perfectly. Sure, you can see that. Sure, it's all hard to calculate utility perfectly, but even imperfect calculations are better than blindly following the updated moral rules of current days. So basically, we're able to try to provide to the masses while having yourself be hap- happier too. Because a few uses of rebuilding before I go on to my first extension. So number one, our first argument is basically how it leads to better governance and public policy. Guys, do you remember the COVID pandemic? COVID pandemic was inherently a utilitarian decision because of the fact that you're technically infringing on people's rights, but it restricted your personal freedom just to save millions of lives. That's basically the goal of utilitarianism. You're basically the goal of utilitarianism, like sure, you're able to get some temporary pain, some temporary things, but in the long term, you're basically able to benefit the masses. You're able to help the prioritize the greatest good over extreme individualism, which is all that I got from the OG case. So number two, the thing we claim that it protects rights more effectively than the rights-based morality because OG claims that utilitarianism weakens rights, but in reality, it protects them better. Because number one, things like privacy versus security. Because yes, some privacy is going to be sacrificed, but it's going to be to benefit for national safety and anti-terrorism efforts. Because if you're just because this is the government does anyway. They have access to some of like you guys think know the meme about like your FBI agent. These guys have access to things like your internet browsing history. Like this is what utilitarianism does. You're basically sacrificing some of your inherent like rights that are substanted in the current status quo, but for the benefits of like your community or your nation. So what things like the speech laws, which absolute free speech, which allows hate speech, but that harms minorities. So we're basically trying to maximize the benefit by actually trying to fix the rights that are inherently a bit individualistic and try to fix it for the mass good. So utilitarianism balances the rights with your overall well-being instead of blindly following the outdated moral rules. Number three, because it solves the societal problems that rights-based morality cannot. Things like climate change, AI ethics, global health crises, they all require weighing costs and benefits. They can't just be set by saying yes or no because it's not black or white. Things are having to be sacrificed. Things will go away. You can't just solve this by saying you can't just follow the rights and see what happens then. Because if you follow the rights, things like climate change will get worse. Things like the health of the world will get worse. So what is the impact of this? It basically leads to better, more effective policies that improve the life for the majority. Ensures the fair resource allocation and more just society. So what's this lead to my extension? It's that utilitarianism strengthens, not weakens, social bonds. Because number one, it encourages cooperation instead of selfishness. OG claims that utilitarianism destroys relationships, but prioritizing the greater good actually builds stronger, more altruistic communities. Because example, organ donation. In the utilitarian world, people are more willing to donate organs because it saves more lives. Because of the fact that even if you sacrifice like you sacrifice your living condition because for like a bit because you lose one kidney or maybe you have to recover because you donated a liver, you guys save a bunch of people you're able to save people that need it because you were able to make that sacrifice. So what does this basically lead to in the long term? So basically families and friendlies basically already function on this utilitarian logic because parents prioritizing their kids' future over short-term pleasure, e.g. working hard instead of always playing with them. This things utilitarianism is active in our day-to-day world. This basically means we're basically encouraging it more and more and more. Things like friending help each other because it creates mutual benefit. Which this proves OG claim that utilitarianism makes relationship transactional is false because human connections naturally involve these trade-offs in the first place. You can't just say that, yes, you can't just say that, oh, you have to do everything for your job. You have to do everything
Yeah, I.
for your no, I'll take that later. You can't the OG case is very black and white, and and, and the fact that they tried to just argue that utilitarianism makes relationships transactional, which means number three, it reduces the harmful social divides. A world driven by pure emotion and bias leads to tribalism and division. Utilitarianism promotes fairness. If helping the poor benefits society, we should do it even if some people dislike taxes. This leads to leading to a more cooperative and fair society, which leads to strengthens genuine human connections based on well-being, not arbitrary traditions. So why do we win this debate? The rights-based morality leads to irrational decisions and greater harm because it's a very arbitrary thing. Utilitarianism tries to maximize your benefits
Yeah,
to the
I.
masses by having little sacrifices to benefit a bigger number of people. Because utilitarianism basically produces a better governing body and a fairer society to the fact that you're able to get a government that does research allocation properly, things like taxation properly. They're able to maximize your security because things like social bonds are strengthened, not weakened in a utilitarian world. We're able to prove that because in both worlds, utilitarianism is going to happen. In our world, we're able to prove the fact that utilitarianism is going to be a net benefit in in the current in the current status quo rather than a world where utilitarianism is a weak moral framework where insofar as they use things like virtue ethics and stuff like that. It's, and so basically we basically try and
Further
we basically weigh over them.
7:30.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for that, DLO. Now calling on member of government to open up the closing half of the debate. Here.
Can someone confirm if I'm audible again? Thanks.
Yeah, you're still audible.
Okay, thank you. Oh no, 5%. You're setting my timer. Anyways, hello everyone, Terrence here. And just a few shoutouts to everyone I know, especially to Red, who is near beside me right now, who competed in the Caritas debate tournament, but unfortunately, he did not break. But it's okay. It's okay, Red. And shout out to my partner, who is on my side also. Hi, Avi. Thank you for partnering me up in this debate tournament. And especially to my debate society, the Sui Generis. Even though we are just a small institution in the Batangas, I really appreciate this. I really appreciate this social institution that drives betterment in our province. And more importantly, to my loved one, Nina. If you're hearing this, I hope you can hear me and you're proud of me. And to Pia Franco and to Pia Ivan, who are my greatest brothers and mentors, who teach me how to debate. I hope you guys are also listening and are proud to me. Anyways, starting my speech in three. Wait, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The opening government fails to give what this model looks like then, and a chunk of important discussion as to why utilitarianism is bound to fail in both practice and ideal definition. I'll completely hijack them at this point of time. Secondly, then, the opening opposition falsely assume that the greater good accurately reflects humanity's overall well-being. In reality, what is defined as the greater good is shaped by dominant institutions and societal elites and majority interests rather than by genuine moral reasoning or what is truly best for all individuals. Government, corporations, and cultural powers set the standard for what constitutes progress, morality, and acceptable sacrifices. This means it will prioritize efficiency, economic growth, or political stability over fairness and justice. This means that the so-called greater good will benefit those in power while sidelining the needs of minorities and dissenting voices. The opening opposition wrongly assumes that the acts like blood donation are rooted in utilitarianism. This is false, panel. True altruism is a moral choice based on empathy, not a numbers-driven sacrifice for the so-called greater good. Blood donation is reversible. Utilitarian sacrifice is not. Blood regenerates within weeks, meaning donors can give without permanently harming themselves. Utilitarianism, on the other hand, demands irreversible sacrifices, giving up one's time, labor, or even loved ones for the greater good without a way to reclaim them. So the question is whether you will save your loved one and sacrifice 5 person, or save the 5 people at the expense of your loved one. Not to judge the question, but the better question is who put them in that situation in the first place. Most of the discussion is mainly upon on this idea of this ideal definition of what utilitarianism is, but not that they are not debating in what is in the practice. So what I'll do is I'll establish a few setups then. First is that what is the concept of majority in the concept of minority under this debate. The majority is the collective interest of the society, but in practice, it is shaped by powerful institutions, corporations, and political entities that set the standards for what is deemed good. For example, how did the colonizers categorize unknown civilizations as uncivilized? So the minority consists of marginalized groups that are having alternative lifestyles and dissenting opinions, which are often dismissed as less important because they do not fit into the utilitarian calculus of maximizing net happiness. Now, secondly, then, why is the concept of greater good flawed and artificial? The greater good is not neutral. It is shaped by historical biases, economic incentives, and political narratives. What is considered good for society is often dictated by those in power rather than through moral reasoning. Many people subscribe to the greater good not because they truly believe in it, but because they are conditioned to accept it. Many people subscribe to the idea of greater good not out of genuine moral conviction, but because they have been conditioned to accept it as the default framework for decision making. This conditioning comes from the societal norms, education, media narratives, and even economic structures that we live in that frame utilitarianism as the most rational or the objective way to approach morality. For example, corporate work culture that promotes extreme productivity and overworking as part of economic progress, even when it leads to burnout and declining mental health. Similarly, government justifies sacrificing civil liberties is necessary for the greater good, even if it disproportionately harms certain groups. In reality, this is blind acceptance. Thirdly, then, what does this model look like then? Which is the opening government fails to establish. First is that decisions are made based on principled reasoning rather than solely calculating which option benefits the largest number of people. Secondly, then, rather than a centralized authority dictating what is best for everyone, local communities and individuals have more agency in shaping policies that affect them directly. Thirdly, then, societal decisions would account for individual emotions, experiences, and moral convictions rather than reducing ethics into a mathematical calculations of happiness. Fourthly, then, companies and institutions would focus on individual fulfillment, mental health, and even the labor practices rather than maximizing efficiency and profit at all costs. Fifthly, then, people would have the freedom to live according to their own beliefs rather than being pressured to conform to majority-defined moral calculations. Few preemptions. The closing opposition will say that, therefore a person can kill another person to satisfy their ethical beliefs. No, basic morality exists. That's exactly the flaw of utilitarianism. It reduces morality to a numbers game, where even something extreme as murder can be justified if it benefits enough people. This is why basic morality exists independently of utilitarian calculations. Fourth setup, why utilitarianism in practice is in an ideal definition is flawed and is bound to fail for the people. First is that utilitarianism presents itself as a rational, objective moral framework that maximizes happiness for the greatest number of people. But the problem is, this is the specific tool that disproportionately serves the interests of the elites and dominant institution, making it fundamentally flawed and unsustainable. Utilitarianism assumes as an objective measure of happiness, but who decides what counts as happiness or well-being? In reality, elites in institutions shape that very definition of that greater good based on their interests. For example, even the government justify authoritarian policies such as mass surveillance or censorship as necessary for national security, even if they infringe on civil liberties or even weaponize them against the people. Secondly, then, corporations push exploitative labor practices under the guise of economic growth that they accept that some must suffer for the overall benefit of the economy. Secondly, then, utilitarianism disguises oppression as a necessary trade-off for social progress. If policies are judged purely by the numbers of people benefiting, smaller marginalized groups are seen and will be guaranteed as an acceptable sacrifices. Colonialism, we already seen this. Colonialism and forced assimilation were justified as civilizing missions. They say that native populations must be subjugated for the progress of the empire. Similarly, gentrifications pushes out poor communities, claiming that urban development benefits the majority even if they claim the ancestral lands. By relying on this aggregate or like in this unreliable of our well-being, it ignores how costs and benefits are unevenly distributed. Thirdly, then, this is a short-term gain and a long-term collapse. Utilitarianism prioritizes immediate efficiency. This leads to a long-term instability where our very foundation of ethics and foundation of our very foundation of morals are compromised. Governments sacrifice press freedom for stability to enjoy a temporary order, but will eventually face mass unrest upon the people. Companies that exploit workers for short-term profit or even like in the long-term profit, the employee will face burnout and the employees will also strike or even cause economic collapse. Also, environmental destruction is justified under the name of progress, but climate disasters eventually make that progress unsustainable, right? And lastly, then, utilitarianism in our world allows morally repugnant actions, even if they can be framed as beneficial in the long run. This is why elites love utilitarianism. It gives them moral cover for exploitation and harm in the long term. War crimes and torture are justified as necessary
Further,
evils or
sorry,
tool to
sorry,
protect the majority.
7:30.
And
Have to
because of
cut
the
you off.
reasons, my time is up. Proud.
Thank you for that, member of government. Now calling on member of the opposition. Here.
You're here. Hi. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Hi. My name is Aki. Pronouns anything, really. For POI pref, I prefer it from the 5th to 6th minute. Please do not badger. If you give me a POI before that, there's a really slight chance that I'll take it. But okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. This house prefers a world where individuals are not strongly predisposed towards utilitarianism. This means then that this motion is a world reset motion, in wherein we do not see the status quo, wherein there's going to be a completely different world in which this was not mechanized by any of the teams before us. So then I'll explain that to you later. Now, let's go on to some terms then, because I believe that the teams before us couldn't actually mechanize the term predisposed in their speeches. Why? Because predisposition means that you have a tendency or an inclination to do this one thing because it's deeply ingrained to you based on past experiences. That means then that you have a basis for this. Now, I'll explain that more on later. Our first point is that utilitarianism is now then the ultimate equalizer in our society. We believe that we do not concede to the world that OO give us because we don't completely concede to the world OO give us because in OO's world everything is good, everything is perfect. We tell you then that you cannot have a world where everything is good. You cannot have a balance in a world if you do not have the same amount of bad and the same amount of good. This is why this is the trade-off then in both of the teams. Now, I'll explain to you why then it's better in our world that we have balance and that this utilitarianism is able to do that, because on our side of the world we have the incentive to help from the very first minute you were born. You have the incentive to help other people. There's going to be a balance in society because you bring the best out of people. There's going to be, for example, if we play into government's mechanization that's saying that, oh, there's going to be more marginalized people, we tell you then that in our world you're going to be able to recognize these marginalized people. You're going to be able to help these people because you're actually not because you're inclined to do so because it's the default settings like CG is trying to say, but because this is what you believe in. If in the first place I believe that I can do good, then I'm going to do that. Because why would you want to harm other people, right? But I'll explain that later on as well. In our world, then, it means that everyone's happiness counts, regardless of their social status. This means then you're able to avoid elitism. Why? Because you avoid privileging any individual's group over others. That means then, for example, if I'm the president of an organization, I cannot just keep everyone's talents to myself. I'm going to spread these people around, or I'm going to actually be able to do something wherein these people have the same amount of time for a specific task, or wherein these people are able to like spend their talents on another thing, because I don't want to limit them not to their full potential, because at the end of the day utilitarianism has the goal to bring out the best in people, to get a choice that produces the greatest possible outcome that benefits everyone. Or if it's not that, then it's something that will bring the less harm in people. Now, the thing is with our case and how we delineate with our openings is I'll explain it later in my rebuttals, but Here in CO, we look at the future more. There's going to be more benevolence on our side because we are able to look at the long-term benefits, right? There's going to be like there's going to be more thinking of the greater good rather than instant gratification. How are we then able to delineate this from our openings? Because openings literally just gave us a one-liner of this, but we want to flesh it out for you. This is then something that even if you have to sacrifice something for it in the greater
Yeah.
good, this sacrifice will be worth it later. So then all the teams, okay. So then this here in CO, we believe that you can still do the greatest good without sacrificing things that's yours, right? It's the equalizer, right? Because every team keeps saying that, oh, because it's utilitarianism, right? You have to sacrifice something that's irreversible. You have to give something that's your own, that will greatly impact you. I tell you then that in our world, you can give something to another person. You can sacrifice something for another person without it having this so much impact on you, because we tell you then you want to benefit the most people. That includes you. That means then you don't want that means then you don't want to give something to other people that will greatly impact you with a harm, right? Because that just benefits them. At this point, utilitarianism means that you want this balance to happen. You want to be able to have this balance. You want to be able to benefit everyone. So what good does it do if it harms me and it benefits the other person, right? I tell you then that the large scale of utilitarianism isn't just, oh, this is good, this is bad, this is what we're going to do. No, this is going to be, as I've said, going to be the literal silver lining. So, yeah, okay. For my rebuttals then, OO lacks the mechanization in their case. They don't tell us why this predisposition looks like, why it's important, what does their world look like. Their world is just a perfect world wherein there's so much good, so much happiness, so much everything, but literally we cannot have that. That does not exist. At least then on our
Right.
side, later I prove to you why there's going to be, even though there's going to be bad, there's going to be more good with utilitarianism. Why do you assume that Another thing I would like to note is why do these teams assume that utilitarian population would create laws that enable harm on other people, right? This is CG telling us that I'm going to kill someone for the sake of my happiness. No, that's not going to happen, because if you look at it like in the reality, right? I have morality. I'm not just going to kill someone because it makes me happy. It's not also going to like benefit other people. If I have someone that I hate, I despise, it's not like I'm going to harm them just because it's going to benefit. Like for example, if I have a classmate that's like being a pain for our classroom, for example, I'm not just going to
Right.
harm this person so that it's already protected me, dude. I'm not going to harm this person just because I believe that it's going to benefit the entire class. Because at the long term, I will look at this person and be like, oh, this person might be a doctor. This person might be able to help other people. This person will be able to grow out of it. At least on our side, we believe that you don't have to experience suffering first, like what government is trying to tell us, because you have to experience suffering first so that you have the inclination to do good, so that you have the benevolence to do good. At least on our side, we believe that in the first place, you already have the benevolence. You don't need to sacrifice something from your mental state, from your physical or whatever. You don't need to sacrifice something so that you can do good, because at the very first place, you already have good. Just like how in the trolley problem, right? You have, for example, like CJ then tries to tell government then tries to tell us that, oh, you're going to save these bad politicians because it's a greater good. No, because why would you? Because in the very first place, there's not going to be that like in this world, there's not going to be that much elitists or bad politicians, because we already tell you that they already have the inclination to do good. They already have the benevolence to do good. So it means that there's going to be a less risk of them being like popular in our population, right? That's why in the very first place it was CO. Thank you.
Thank you for that, member of the opposition. Now calling on government whip. Here.
Hi, hello. My name's Avi, pronoun she and her. Will never be offended if it assumes gender me. A few shout outs as well before I start. First, thank you for my teammate Terrence, who has been with me for the rest of the round and the previous rounds. Thank you to my Sui Generis Brahman Debate Society members who support me along the way. Thank you to Kuya Franco and Kuya Ivan for teaching us, even though they are sometimes morally gray. Thank you for my parents for financing my debate tournament hobby, even though it's expensive sometimes. And yeah, thank you for the minorities because I am one of you. Uh, Now starting my speech in three, two, one, go. No introductions. Let me go straight right in. Right. First, what went wrong and a few points of clarification. OG did great in bringing up the minority and that everything in the world becomes transactional, but they fail to tackle on how or why utilitarianism may be predisposed in the first place, or which is crucial in opposing such predisposition. Second, call out for all, they are blinding us with positive impacts, but these are inherently flawed. For example, they mentioned about progressive taxation, but this is wrong matter because progressive taxation advocates for everything that is contradicting to what they tell you. Progressive taxation is about equitable taxation that adjusts to the ability of the taxpayer. But still, let's take them at their best. Helping the poor and genuine empathy to advocate for the minority isn't just about pure emotions. It's about pragmatic help, but with care, even if it means not prioritizing the majority who are probably stable at the very least. Thirdly, CO believes that this is exactly what you believe from the moment you were born, and that's exactly the problem, which will I prove to you later. But then let's give OO a chance because we are against utilitarian. OO tells us that basically they have a more reliable moral framework for fairness, which results to better social and political structure, and they argue that this is good overall. However, we prove to you that the importance of the minority here has to be heard. Even if OG already argued this, we already told you that it's not just about minorities or the marginalized groups, but the opposition or the opposing sides or sectors that may disagree with the common mainstream beliefs labeled as being utilitarian. This Think about this, my fellow debate lovers. What would you feel if debate tournaments do not allow small institutions like ours to participate because one, they are small compared to the whole debating circuit celebrities. Second, the predisposed idea is that there will be more quality discussions because A, these celebrities are more exposed to opportunities to debate and even the art of competitive debating, and B, they just don't have the prestige backed by big schools we can't afford to enroll to. The status quo of debating is what exactly makes predisposed utilitarian worthy to oppose to. Anyone can join no matter how nobody their insta is because we value the essence of conversation and the art of debating instead of echo chambers. Secondly, going back, how is this fairness when someone are left out? This doesn't mean that you have to forgive all criminals instead of saints, like OO framed it to be. It's just that you let these bad people to go to court and be presumed innocent until proven guilty instead of straight up killing them just because their wrists are cuffed. Giving a portion of people a chance is better compared to conforming to the narrative that was taught to you since you were a kid, right? Uh, Before I proceed, POIs, three, two, one, no engagement. Now, let's proceed with what we're mainly tackled, and this is where I also crush CO, right? First, OO advocates for fairness while OG advocated for minorities. However, on our world in CG, people are given the chance to not be marginalized. Only CO cater to the real justice here because, for example, in cases in court, they're named as, for example, People versus David, because if the people are collectively against him, he is still given a chance for a trial to prove his innocence. And in OO's world, they would rather pull the lever. Though OG advocated for minorities, we told you that utilitarianism has become shallow, weaponized, and bound to fail. Terrence proved this already. This dilutes the intention of such philosophy and worsened when predisposed. Terrence proved to you that this predisposed utilitarianism can be easily slapped by a brand called utilitarianism by to any corrupted and abusive deed that colonizers, imperialists, elites, and family dynasties can do in the status quo. Aside from this, we already proved to you that utilitarianism requires you to do things or decisions that are irreversible and unrecoverable, just like the trolley problem opening class about. Now, secondly, predisposed philosophy. CO tells you that having something you believe in, which is unchallenged, is good because then again you have an advocacy, and this is what exactly they want. But however, They fail to realize that this is what the bad people wants you to believe. It has become predisposed so bad you can challenge that narrative. They advocate as well in helping others, but sure, let's take them at their best and let's say that everything they said will happen. But what will happen if it has consequences and you are faced with a dilemma or a conflict? You can't do it, right? Because it's exactly what's against your utilitarian advocacy. Helping others is not just about giving a 5 peso coin to a beggar or pulling a lever. It's about being able to pull the lever knowing that someone can die and that the effects are irreversible, right? Now, wait. Para at the end of the day, the elites, corporations, governments, and the wealthy determine what counts as the greater good because then again, they can manipulate us and change the narrative. This means policies will always lean toward maintaining their dominance rather than uplifting the powerless and the minority and the opposition. Utilitarianism is a specific tool built for elites and only for the elites, hence they are weaponized. Again, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage, rage against the dying light. They will tell you that the world must be measured, that the weight of one soul can be balanced against the joy of the many, that the suffering of the few is a fair price for the comfort of the masses. They will call this reason, they will call this morality. But what is morality if it demands sacrifice from those who never chose it in the first place? What is justice if it allows a single innocent to be swallowed by the needs?
Right, I assume that was the end of their speech. Thank you for that, Government Whip. Okay, calling on Opposition Whip to formally end this debate. Here.
Okay, so hello, am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so just some shout outs, right? So firstly, shout out to the Adno JHS Debate Society. Your support has been very, very good. Best insti for real. Also, shout out to Sir Al, best debate coach. Shout out to Adno SHS and Adno College for cross training with us. Love you all. And lastly, shout out to my partner Aki, who have been bearing with me from the very start of Caritas. Okay, so starting my speech in three. Okay, wait. Okay, starting my speech in three, two, one, go. We are literally debating in the Novice finals round right now. This tells us that people value fairness or logic. But ask yourself this: would we be even here today if our moral instincts weren't wired to seek the best outcomes for everyone? That is literally the world we defend today. We think that acting the moment she spoke is already debate winning. It is better to prevent the accident from happening in the first place than fixing it. We think that that's what you get acting exclusively, and we think that it's debate winning. But sure, let's be charitable. The problem with governments and by convention, opening opposition is that they assume that this is that this house believes that motion. But panel, this is that this house prefers motion. This house prefers a world motion, meaning that it is a world reset debate, which means that people will already be like predisposed to whatever value they hold. We think that it is only in Aki that you think that you actually get the proper meta on how this debate even works. But sure, right, let's be charitable. Responding to like the whole case of like responding to like the full case of closing government. What can closing government give us? Firstly, they claim that utilitarianism prioritizes elites. They argue that utilitarianism leads to irreversible sacrifices like exploitation. They say that happiness becomes mathematically calculated rather than individually meaningful, and they claim having an unquestioned moral instinct is dangerous and it leads to manipulation. Why are they wrong? Firstly, utilitarianism does not inherently prioritize elites. We think that there would be institutions and norms exist to distribute good fairly. We think this is good because number one, this house prefers our motion, meaning since time immemorial, people are already used to this case already. They assume that power structures always dictate morality, but utilitarianism is built on constantly reevaluating and optimizing for the best outcomes. Secondly, the concept of the greater good is not static. We think that it evolves based on how you participate in the society, based on how you progress your life. And if their claim were true, then democratic systems would not even exist in the first place. Yet they do, precisely because people are inclined to consider what benefits it brings to like the whole society. Secondly, we think that irreversible sacrifices is a mischaracterization. We think that utilitarianism accounts for long-term impact. Sacrifices in utilitarianism are weighed against sustainable benefits. Blood donation regenerates insofar as like CG posits to us, policies evolve, and the very principle of maximizing utility prevents permanent exploitation. In our world, we think the protections exist because the problem with opening with the whole government bench in general is that they assume that people on their side are not benevolent anymore. Guys, we think that human rights frameworks and we think that laws are still going to exist that would actually prevent extreme utilitarianism from becoming reckless if government even wants to tell us that if government even wants to paint opposition in a bad light. And also then we think that the alternative is worse because if people are not predisposed to maximizing good, their moral instincts only become arbitrary or self-serving. Because if we don't prioritize rational, outcome-driven decision making, then what's the alternative? A moral system that is based on traditions only or on individual whims? CG never proves that an undefined alternative moral instinct would suddenly lead to better outcomes. 40. We think that an unquestioned morality is a misframing because it is only our side that actually ensures constant ethical evaluation. We think that the predisposition towards utilitarianism does not mean blind obedience to it. It is only on our side that you get sovereignty because you get less minorities on our side because from the get-go, since time immemorial, there are no minorities to even deal with in the first place. People debate ethics, challenge injustice, and to actually improve moral frameworks. The only way morality becomes unchallenged is if we abandon structured ethical reasoning altogether, which happens more in their world and not ours. But even if they are correct that utilitarianism is sometimes misused, why is it a bad thing? Firstly, if utilitarianism can be corrupted, so can any moral system. Guys, we think that misuse can still happen. It's equally symmetric. The difference only is that utilitarianism inherently corrects for mistakes by measuring the impact and when you actually adjust your course. And second, also, I would like to point out that this is this house purpose or motion, meaning that world building has to exist. The problem with CG by convention is that their world lacks a clear mechanism for moral improvement because without a predisposition towards maximizing good, then how do people even decide what is ethical in the first place? They don't really answer this. Why are we correct and why does Aki win? Because it is only in CG that you prove that any alternative moral instinct creates better outcomes. And also because instead of debating whether utilitarianism is perfect insofar as OO claims, we show that it is the best available option. But even if utilitarianism has flaws, we think that our world is still better because it provides a structured way to correct them. Even if their world prevents extreme sacrifices, it often comes at the cost of unpredictable or like inconsistent moral reasoning. But even if they prove that utilitarianism has risk, they never prove that an alternative moral instinct is just going to be more reliable. How do we delineate from opening opposition? The problem with O is that they fall into the classic trap of making everything seem magically better on their world. Their argument assumes that a utilitarian predisposition automatically leads to good outcomes without considering the trade-offs that you actually have to do. We agree on their side. We agree with opening opposition that utilitarianism is better for society, but they are not really realistic with it. They say that, oh, people are less corrupt, we protect everyone, more happiness on their side. But our framing is better because we acknowledge that utilitarianism still needs papers, thereby we already box out the whole government mesh in general. Which exists in our world through things like laws. Because like the problem with like in government and my own is that they don't really have any safeguards on our side. It is only in Aki that you prove exclusively that they are going to be safeguarded. And also that we think that all here assumes that utilitarianism protects rights better because they serve society, but they actually fail to explain how people's predispositions towards ethics or like shape laws or like how the world evolves. Our argument is better because we actually show that utilitarianism allows for moral progress because the characterization of government's world is weak. If they say in government's world people are selfish, but they don't explain why alternative moral instincts lead to selfishness. We go further by collapsing government's framing by asking them if what are people predisposed to instead. This is literally my POI to OG that was not really fully clarified. It is only on our side. It is only on our side that you actually get a proper moral predisposition that we think is like 10 times better. Then how do we win over OG then? Who I think is also very problematic. Firstly, the problem with them is that they make it a debate about whether utilitarianism is good or bad. We don't think that's a case. We think that we think that there are still going to be safeguards. We think right. And also then I think they actually fail to define what people are predisposed to instead. They admit that people might still use utilitarianism, but just won't be predisposed to it. The response to this is that OG is literally so soft stance on their case. If people are not inclined towards utilitarianism, then they have no alternative on their side. Because and also I would like to point out that the terms that OG posits to you are exaggerated and they often contradict each other. They claim relationships become transactional on their side, but they also say that people would not know what to follow. If people have no clear moral instinct in the first place, then I ask them, wouldn't that create more uncertainty in relationships and not less? And also, they say that utilitarianism leads to emotional detachment, but later they say that people can still be utilitarian and just not predisposed to it. We think that this is literally incoherent on OG. Oh no, why do we win? First then, is that we think that it is only on our side that even if utilitarianism has flaws, we think that it is the most pragmatic. It is a self-correcting system to actually ensure that the world will actually progress. So if you actually care about creating a world where individuals actually make rational, consistent, and fair decisions, not just for themselves, but for society as a whole, then I think Siong wins this. Thank you.
Thank you for that opposition whip. You may now cross the house. Congratulations to everyone for finishing the final round of Novice finals. Awesome.